Hi, everybody. Welcome to You Are the Opera of Power with Gail and
Hi from Jane. Hi, Gail.
I. Um, Today, we're going to talk more about judgment. We've done one video, I believe, that talks about judgment from experiencing the other side of judgment, which we'll link in the description. And today, we're going to talk about judgment and how we can learn more about ourselves from the judgments we make of others. So Jane, you had a really good example from an experience you had yesterday. And the important thing is instead of judging the judgment, use it for your benefit. What can you learn about yourself from the judgment? And then we can get into the whole forgiveness aspect. But Jane, why don't you share your yesterday's experience?
Okay, so yesterday I was down at the beach and there was about 6 kids unattended playing, and I thought the parent was with them at one point, and we were really close to the water, and I was kind of looking around for the parent, and the one lady that was sitting with them, um, I thought they were with her, and we left the beach temporarily to go get ice cream and left all our stuff sitting there, all our buckets and play toys. And when we came back, the kids were using all of them and basically running away with them up the beach. So I said, well, um, you shouldn't take things. Like I said, you have to put them back. And then I was like, okay, and you guys can actually, if you asked me, I would have said, yeah, you can play with them. So we all started, so they were immediately just started playing right where I was. And after, there was quite a young child, probably 2 maybe. And eventually the other lady came over to me, and I had assumed that they were with her. And she's like, no, I don't know where the parents are. And I'm like, I don't know where the parents are either. And while we were talking, the little 2-year-old disappeared into thin air, and both of us were like, where did he go? So then it triggered me to get really concerned. So I walked up the beach, asked a couple of your children. He said no. And behind a building around the corner where the kids were out of view from the parent, there was a parent sitting there. And I went up to her and I said, are they your children? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, they're really close to the water and it's unsafe to leave them there. And she said, well, why do you care? Basically, they're my kids. And I said, well, they're the community's kids if you're letting the community look after them. And I got really triggered, and I was mean to her. In my mind, I was like, okay, well, you're lucky I don't report you. And I walked away. So, for the rest of the day, I was really triggered by it. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, where's forgiveness here? Where do I find forgiveness? Because it didn't occur to me at the time. So then I got thinking about it, and I came up and talked to you about it. And that's when the whole process started. Actually, I didn't really get into that until we started talking about it later on that day. So I sort of looked at that and I thought, oh, okay, I have to forgive her. She was overwhelmed. Maybe, I'm judging her as a mother, and she's overwhelmed, and she's unable to take care of all her children, and she can't, and then I started thinking, and we started talking about that. And then it occurred to me, if that's a projection of my own fears, what in that did I need to look at for myself? And that was one of my fears. I have 5 kids, and that was one of my fears, that I wouldn't be, and actually recent fears, that I don't have enough of me to go around for all of them. So then we started talking even more. And even when the one little one disappeared, it was kind of a freaky moment for both me and the other person. And I was thinking later, after I left your place again, that happened to me one time where one of the kids went missing at that park, actually.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you that. And one of my biggest fears was that they were going to drown. and I ran down to the beach, was my first go-to spot, ran down there. So all these coincidences of all my fears that I had projected onto her, and I had kind of felt like when I walked away from that interaction, it's like, I don't know, that didn't feel, where I wanted to be with that. Like that wasn't in love. And then we got talking about which forgiveness, of course, leads you to the ability to love. So then I was like, well, what if, and then I experienced, once I figured all that out, I experienced the other side of my judgment. And I was like, oh, wow, like I probably should have approached that gently and with love. And are you okay? Are you, do you need any help? I was concerned, or, anything, because I got thinking about that later. What would have I wanted in that circumstance rather than judgment? Because I went right to judgment on that one for sure. So,
well, the thing is too, I mean, the way you handled it was objectively.
right.
Oh, the way we were talking about it last night, and how the search that you're looking for is to see it subjectively.
Yes.
And so if in that moment you were able to deal with the situation, like from the first concern you had from a subjective perspective, then you may not have even had to say anything to her. She would
right. Yes.
took her kids and went on. One of the things before we get into sort of analyzing from a subjective perspective, because I think what you did objectively is what most people would do. But the point of this is, you're in creating your reality, being the operant power. You don't, those aren't situations that you like. You prefer something different. And so, like you notice, it starts within you because that was your projection out.
Right. And remember I said it started the day before that I had all these feelings about being overwhelmed. Right. And so it was all my projection.
Right. So just before we get into, when I can't remember if I talked about this on camera or not, but a week or so ago, and this wasn't my first experience, this was actually my second. I was driving to a store, and I turned into the store. The store is like these big box stores, right? So there's like little plazas and little laneways and stuff you go through. So they had people out picking up garbage, like throughout the parking lot and the whole area. So I was driving in behind a row of stores in just a little laneway that would take me to the big parking lot. And I pulled in there, and there was a man standing against the wall, and he was just kind of standing there like no movement at all. And I thought, what's going on? That's really weird. It was just a feeling I had. I mean, I've seen people just stand and do nothing and not have the feeling, right? But I had this feeling like, what's he doing? And then all of a sudden he starts picking up his garbage. He's bending over and just looks at me as I drive by. And it occurred to me in that moment, the feeling that I had was that he didn't have any life when I turned the corner. Normally we flow so much that it just automatically happens, and you don't even notice that somebody has no life. And so it was when I happened to turn, and he was just kind of there waiting basically to be activated, given life, being activated. And when I noticed him and noticed that he was kind of like, he's got no light, like it's really weird. He started, going on about his business as you would expect. So my point of that is that's what we're doing when we're with the thoughts in our head, when we say we're giving life to the players or the actors in the scene are frozen until you give life to them. So in your case, like you said, the day before, you were thinking, I'm not enough. I don't have, I'm worried about the amount of time I can give and taking care of myself and taking care of them and all that sort of stuff. So you were creating characters that you were going to give life to, and it happened to be the next day. Because of course, once you start down this road, you're held to a higher standard and things show up really fast, depending on the intensity of the feeling behind them, right? So when you have those kinds of feelings, where you're not feeling good enough or you're feeling worried, anything fear related tends to be really intense. So
we lost you there for a minute.
Oh, actually, yeah, I noticed. I just kept talking anyways.
Okay. All right.
Just saying that.
Yeah.
I was just saying that when you feel worry and anything fear related,
yes,
are normally pretty intense. So they will manifest quickly, especially if you're walking down this pathway, because you're held to a higher standard.
Oh, there's so many like aspects of what I just thought of even more stuff, that there's so many layers of oranges on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
So had you not had this conversation you had with yourself and the worry and the fear and the creative moment the night before, your experience the next day would have been totally different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would have gone to the park, you would have had fun, you would have got your ice cream, you may have met those kids, but it wouldn't be under the same kind of circumstances. So that's the point I'm trying to get across, is that we actually give life. Like, if you can think, Neville Goddard talks in one of his lectures, which was actually one of my favorite ones because it kind of hit me the most. And I guess that's probably why I've had those few experiences where I've seen somebody like totally with no life brought to life or come to life, like in front of my eyes, where the guy had a dream, and so he was sitting on a cloud, and then he would look down below the cloud and there was millions of scenes. Sort of like the way I kind of saw it is, if you're in an office with all those different divisions and partitions for everybody's desk, that kind of thing, except it was like scenes like you would looking out your window, houses and cars and buildings and all this sort of stuff. So what he did in this dream, he jumped off the cloud and went into one, and nothing was happening in that scene until he jumped into it. So there was a car there from the cloud. He was looking down, the car wasn't moving, there was people standing, doing nothing. Birds, kind of just doing that in the air. And the minute he moved into that scene, everything animated. Cars started going, people started walking, birds started flying. And that's what it's like. And that's, like I said, that's what I saw from a different perspective, because I was in my car and I was, in this earth and or on this earth and, just living my life, going about my normal day. And I gave life to that guy to start picking up the garbage simply by my awareness of him. And so that's with the guy in the Neville Goddard story. He became aware of that scene when he got into that scene, and he animated everything. So it's the same idea when you got to, you were thinking about all of these worries and everything, and then you jumped into that scene of being at the beach, and based on this creation from the night before, this is the scene that played out. And so you were the one giving life to it. And that's what's really important about connecting. You don't have to look for the reasons why something happened, but it's really helpful to be able to understand. Now, the next time, you're not going to have to go through all of this analysis to figure out why something happened, because this is your opportunity to notice and understand that, oh yeah, they're connected. We do that. That is our power. That is the power that is me that created this. It's not something I really wanted, but it's something that is going to be really powerful for your understanding. And so I don't recommend going through and analyzing, why did this happen? Why did that happen? But in those moments where you can connect that, oh yeah, I'm worried about that. The very thing that I put on her, my fear for her kids, I put on her, but that's actually how I feel
Yeah.
in the situation in my own kids.
Yeah.
Whether, and I mean, it's also useful in the sense that, okay, you're worrying about your kids and not having enough time and spreading too thin and what's going to happen to them and all that sort of stuff. You see the outcome of that. I mean, it was an okay outcome in your case, but had you had more maybe intensity of somebody really getting harmed, and it's not just being enough of she's not taking care of them, but something happened because
Yes.
care of them. Or if you get that way with your own kids and grandkids, like if I don't do this, then they're going to come to definite harm. Then that would have manifested in your lake experience.
Yeah, it was incredibly well. And then, of course, it occurred to me about love. Like, what would love do? What would I do? So, the solution to my own suffering is love and forgiveness. Like, it just went full circle when we when we analyzed it, I guess. And I guess like fitting that framework into, even noticing what's happening around you, it's hard to understand that you're creating that because it's outside of you, but it's inside of you. So even in that whole process, like you're learning different things about your reality. So
the next time, and you're going to recognize that whatever happens, you know that you've done it because you just proved it to yourself.
Well, and then it wasn't it felt like at first it was like we talked about that, how I would never do that. That's an important factor in all of this because many of the oranges are represented as that. I would never do that. I would never leave my kids at the water and, unattended. That's just whatever. And then remembering, that they were my fears being acted out in front of me. So it's very and that love could have, like I said, I think that was the refinement in response versus reaction, because we've talked a lot about reacting and responding too. Well,
and even if you, instead of when you met the kids, when they came over, you just thought like, oh, all is well, happy little kids, they're well taken care of, all those kinds of things, then chances are their mother would have come down and, oh, nice to meet you. And, or, I was just over there putting the garbage away or whatever, like been the same experience. But we're continuously creating it, right? So whatever those thoughts were, like, what, who owns these kids? Oh my God, that one's so young to be here by himself. All of them, even the oldest one is not old enough to be taken care of. We have all these things running through our head, which are our own judgments and how we think. So when you're making your judgment about you fear you're not enough, like these are all the underlying things that are in your judgment.
Right. And a really important one was what was said was, she said to me, they're my children. And I said, they're the community's children when they're unattended because we're watching them. That has been a thought of mine for the last couple of weeks about commune and community and what that looks like and how to fit that into your life in a healthy way. And so even looking at that, there's that contrast of what I used to believe and then what I'm believing now, right? Like that wouldn't even have occurred to me to say that to her before. I would have just said, well, yeah, I understand but that may be, again, that's an issue with me about trying to own too much of the responsibility of my children and realize, they're of the community as well. They have their own lives. They're doing their own thing. They don't need me to oversee them every second of the day and every situation
Yeah.
that's dangerous. You know,
Yes.
when
Having
because your
faith
kid,
in them.
yeah, yeah,
Because when you have faith in them, really what you're doing is having faith in you.
yes. And I was teetering between those two places for the last couple of weeks because of stuff that's been going on. I've been going from that, you know, do I need to step in and do this thing or should I step back? All is well, all is well. And then I'd go back to all is well. So it was really cool last night when we were talking after it had happened to real, like, because it was one of those, oh, I would never do that. So I want to stress that because they're the ones that you need to probably look at a little closer and go, oh, yeah,
And we always have
there's
lots of those. Never do that. No.
lots.
How does it
Yeah.
relate to me? I would never imagine that.
Right. And I wouldn't, when right a few minutes after you talked to me yesterday, I was still going on in my head with all the narratives that were attached to that, you know, judging. And so again, judging versus forgiving and forgiving would have taken me quicker to my own sense of, and I guess that's the importance in the forgiving is it takes it back to your own subjective place.
Well, yeah, and it's about, you're making it about you. So when you're forgiving somebody, like you can forgive her now,
Mhm.
it's showing you what you're holding in your consciousness, that you think people are like that.
Yes.
That's how we got to it. When I said, like, you think people can act like this, that they don't care and that they're like, whatever, get out of my face and respond like that. And then you said, well, oh my gosh, you know, like I feel like that sometimes, like I don't care, but I do care. And then it creates this
Right.
with you, right?
Yeah.
But it's all about you because she's just reflecting back to you what you're believing. So when you're forgiving her, you're forgiving yourself.
Yes.
Understanding that really helps. Like it's
Yes, it does because it
like
takes it
forgiveness.
and it also takes you into a different sense of power. The subjective thought that I forgive myself for at times feeling like I just couldn't cover it all. I couldn't be there. I couldn't protect. I couldn't, you know, and as a mother and caretaker of a lot of people, you have to get to that. And it's a continuum. Like you have to keep doing that. You have to keep forgiving. Like when another orange comes up, and like you said, a lot of them will come up because a lot of them are like, "There's no way, where?" And then you think about it, you're like, last night I was like, "Oh,
Well, it's not
wow,
because it's not always um, really direct to see. Like Neville used an example, which I always come back to, of a guy that wanted to buy a house. And so he found a house, was the perfect house, but then he's like, oh, I don't know, you know, do I really want it? And, you know, can I afford the mortgage? And is the kitchen right? And then just started the perfect house before. And then it's like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And then he decides, yes, I want it. I want it. So he goes to put an offer in. Well, it's been sold. And what happened was his doubts and his fears created a person that bought the house.
yes,
Not always that you can see it directly.
yes,
And then though, having said that, rather than getting into the whole analyzing every situation to figure it out, get to that place where you just know if that's happened, it's because it's in your consciousness and it's related to you, whether it is something that you believe and have judged yourself about, or if it's just something that you've heard on the TV, heard on the radio, saw on the news that you didn't consciously reject, which means you accepted it. And so it showed up.
And is it basically turning an orange into an apple like we talked about?
When we see something that it, like, if it's not like, no, this just doesn't relate to me, I don't think that way, I never thought that way, I don't accept that, but it shows up in your awareness, then it's something that has you have accepted at some point, whether
Right.
you're conscious of it or not. You didn't consciously reject it. It gets deposited into your purse. Then that becomes an orange. With the judgment things, I think you can refer to them as an orange, but I think the difference is that you clear, when you forgive, you clear out everything. You clear out all the stuff. But it's done in layers. So that's why it's so important to just don't complain that I've been forgiving and it's not changing. No, just persist. If you truly forgive, then you will forgive again, and you'll forgive again. And there will be a point where it's kind of like the tipping point where then, yes, you have forgiven, you feel different, you know you've forgiven, and those things don't show up as much. Those judgments don't show up. I know,
Well, it was, yeah.
I don't know if I talked about this before or not, but when I, many years ago, before I knew anything about the power of the mind, I was at a point where there was somebody that I was around fairly regularly that would judge all the time. Not me, but just in general terms, everything and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I can't listen to this anymore. Thank God I'm not that judgmental. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to prove it to myself, right? So at that time, I used the words cancel, cancel. So if a judgmental thought came up, cancel, 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 cancel. 3 days, 24, like 24 for 3 days, 24 hours for 3 days. I was cancel, 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 cancel. I shocked myself because I wasn't judgmental, or so I thought. But once you start looking and start, noticing, you really are. And it's not a judgment. It's just, we come by it honestly. It's part of, our the beliefs that have been buried in us. And so, and while eating from the tree of knowledge, good and evil. That's love divided in half, judgment, right? Good and bad, two sides of the story. So after 3 days, then there was a noticeable shift because the thoughts were a lot different that were coming up. They weren't those, I didn't have to say cancel, cancel. Now, before anybody uses that technique, I would suggest replacing the cancel, cancel with I forgive. I didn't that time. And now I've gone back and revised that that's what it meant for me. But if you're, going to try doing this, I would suggest I forgive. And if your whole inner conversation is I forgive, perfect. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? It keeps you away from what you don't want, clears the slate, doesn't create any more of what you don't want. And you will, as long as you persist, you will feel a shift.
Oh yeah, I felt a great shift. I felt like I found a whole new place to forgive myself for.
It becomes easier, right?
Yeah.
There's no resistance. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, for sure. Why not?
Mhm.
We're going to, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a friend of mine on, Cindy, who I call the forgiveness queen, because I've known her for about 5 years, and she just started forgiving probably a couple of months ago. And there's been an extraordinary shift, and she'll tell you about it. Now, that's why I'm having her on, because I just think it's so powerful. Because I know how she was before, and I know how she is now, and she knows it. Like it's not a secret, right? She's the first one to say, oh, "Gosh, I was terrible,"
Yeah.
And she's very powerful because she's got had a lot of intense emotion, and a lot of things would show up in her life that she did not want, based on her reactions with this intensity.
Yeah.
And so now she's got it where her reaction is I forgive. And she has all these blessings coming her way, because that's just what forgiveness does. It clears out the old stuff and allows room for forgiveness and blessings, and just enjoy your life.
Yes. Live while you're living.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, people wouldn't necessarily get that, but it's kind of like there's another saying out there. What is it? Most people live to die, but others die to live.
I'm dying to live. Yeah.
Something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. So that's a great example. Like I said, I don't suggest that we analyze every single thing that happens to us, but I mean, I think you're probably from that example and probably previous other ones that you've recognized, like, yeah, okay, like that's me, like that. I created that, and there's nothing to do with that woman because she's only a figment of my imagination. When you look at it like that way,
I know. It's crazy.
like you're a figment of my imagination of what I imagine you to be, and vice versa. Like that's kind of a neat way to look at it, because it spin on,
Yeah.
it's right, and a new meaning to a figment of my imagination.
Yes.
Always used rather derogatory, right? Like it's
Yeah.
but it's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Anyways, anything else you want to say before we call it a day on this one?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, cool. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you think this video can be helpful to anybody else, please share it and feel free to subscribe and like, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.